Friends, as I stand here and speak, there is a revolution happening in China. It's not just a protest, it's a revolution. And the reason why I say it's a revolution is look at what they're demanding. They are demanding Communist Party of China to go. They are demanding Xi Jinping to go. And the protest is happening not in just one place or two towns or cities. It's happening all over China. And this is growing. This has been sparked by a building that burned in Urumqi in East Turkestan. And people of China have already started to say independence for East Turkestan, which in China they say Xinjiang. And therefore, as Tibetans today, we want to tell the people of China who are revolting against their government that we understand you. We stand in solidarity with you. We know what you are undergoing, the frustration, the disappointment, the danger on your private lives. We know because we have been undergoing this for 70 years. And therefore today we are standing here. This has been quickly put together because there is urgent need to send this message of solidarity to the people of China, that as you stand and attempt to bring about a change in your government, change in the political party, and completely subvert your government and the party, we want to say to you, this is what we have been desiring all these years: independence for Tibet and freedom in China. How have we come to this point where what we have been demanding, independence of Tibet, for 70 years, that very slogan the Chinese people are echoing today in 2022? Because all this time, I want to tell people of China, we have been waiting for you to speak up. We have been waiting for you to say this, but you have not. And we understand that in protest that happens in China, it's not like we come to jantar-mantar and after this we go home. No. In China, anyone speaking up against the government, against Xi Jinping, they would be whisked away, taken, jailed, most probably killed. And because it's happening at such a mass scale, the latest count up until now, it says 32 towns and cities. And each of these towns and cities have millions and millions as population. So you can actually calculate how massive and mass scale, widespread this revolution is now becoming and rolling out into. How have we come to this point is Xi Jinping shrewdly used zero COVID policy so that he could smoothly become the president forever. If we actually go back a little, a few months back, we will understand that he used zero COVID. It was not about a disease. China was the one who took care of that disease and said we are COVID free. Then how did suddenly, when he was to become the president forever, how did he then look at zero COVID policy? Shrewdly he used zero COVID policy to immobilize a country of 1.4 billion population. Immobilized, made them not move an inch out of their house. In the name of zero COVID, he made sure that his ascension, his enthronement, becoming the emperor of China, successful. And after ascension to his throne, he still did not relax the zero COVID regime. And this had been suffocating the people of China. buildings, houses, housing corporations, villages, towns, cities. People were suffocated. There are many people who didn't have enough food to eat. Parents who are not able to feed their own children because the people of China have been habituatedly, I'm repeating, people of China have been habituatedly living with this in the name of nationalism, in the name of protecting the government. Now they are saying enough is enough. We will protest unless Xi Jinping, unless Chinese Communist Party go, people of China are going to suffer. I call this revolution because people of China have now decided it's not the tweaking of policies that until and unless Xi Jinping goes, until and unless the Chinese Communist Party goes, there will be no peace, there will be no life in China. And therefore, at the highest risk of getting killed, tortured, jailed, detained, people in China are coming out to protest, risking their life. Even as I speak from here, I've been following the news hour by hour, and I'm seeing everywhere there is zero COVID regime stifling, suffocating the life of people there. And therefore, the people of China taking every risk coming out to protest. This is an unprecedented protest that had never happened before. Even Tiananmen Square massacre that had happened, the protest happened only in Beijing. But this one is now spreading all over China. The protest didn't start from China, though. It started from Tibet. When the Chinese people who were detained within Tibet, when they were unable to go home, they did the first protest against zero COVID regime. And the protest happened in East Turkestan. And finally it happened in Beijing, in Shanghai, Chengdu, Wuhan, Shenzhen, uh, Chengdu, and Guangzhou. It is spreading. And therefore, this is a revolution. Now, what does it mean for India? We have, as Tibetan refugees, we have been in India for 64 years. And in 64 years, we've been telling the government of India and people of India, चीन के ऊपर विश्वास मत करो, चीन के ऊपर विश्वास मत करो, हम बोलते आ रहे हैं. लेकिन यहां से व्यापार के नाम पे, रिश्ते के नाम पे हिंदी चीनी भाई भाई से शुरू हुआ और उसके बाद इन्वेस्टमेंट की अपेक्षा में वो रिश्ता बनाते गए. और तब तक जब गलवान घाटी में हत्याकांड हुआ, तब भारतवासियों को समझ में आया कि असली धोखेबाज और विश्वासघात जो है वो चाइना है. पाकिस्तान के पीछे भी चाइना का हाथ और पैर दोनों हैं. इसीलिए आज हम यहां खड़े हैं. एक मौका है भारत के लिए कि चीन में जो विद्रोह उभार के आ रहे हैं आज, वो एक मौका है कि चीन में भी लोकतंत्र आए, चीन में भी आजादी आए, ताकि चीन की सरकार जिम्मेदारी से भविष्य में जिम्मेदारी से लें. नहीं तो ये दमनकारी, ये डिक्टेटरशिप जो शी जिनपिंग चला रहे हैं चाइना से, वहां कोई प्रश्न नहीं कर सकते, वहां कोई जिम्मेदारी नहीं है, वहां बिल्कुल ओपेक डिसीजन मेकिंग है. इसीलिए भारत के लिए भी चीन में एक लोकतंत्र, एक आजादी, कि चीन में आजादी हो और लोकतंत्र सरकार हो, ये भारत के हित में है. तो इसीलिए मैं तो बोलता हूं कि हम सब भारतवासी इसे मौके उठा के चीन में जो हो रहे हैं उसको समर्थन करें. एक लोकतंत्र देश होने के नाते हम उनको समर्थन करेंगे जहां आजादी की बात करते हैं, जहां लोकतंत्र की बात करते हैं. For 70 years, the Chinese Communist Party treated their own people as animals. और जहां भी कोई प्रोटेस्ट होता है वहां ये बोलते हैं कि ये प्रोटेस्ट जो है बाहर से भड़काया है, कभी बोलते कि अमेरिका ने भड़काया है, कभी बोलते कि किसी और ने पैसे दिए हैं। ये कभी रिकग्निशन नहीं हुआ चीन में कि वहां चीन के लोगों ने आजादी की, लोकतंत्र की मांग की, कि चीन की भीतर वहां के लोग ही मांग कर रहे हैं। चीन लोगों की सोच की, उनकी समझने की, उनकी एहसास की कभी रिकग्निशन नहीं दिया चीन सरकार ने, हमेशा दबाव में रखा। इसीलिए ये चीन के लोग आज उभर के आ रहे हैं, हमको आजादी चाहिए और हमको लोकतंत्र चाहिए। This dictatorship is costly. Though for a long time, the dictatorship in China has been used by the Western countries to continue to benefit trading with cheap made in China products. These Western countries who have been trading with China for cheap made in China products, today they are regretting that they have fallen dependent on cheap supply chains. That these countries are dependent, and today they are not able to make their own products on their own. They're regretting that they're not able to find any accountability in China. And therefore, now it's time for Western countries also to stand up with the people of China for freedom in China, for democracy in China, for accountability in China. Unless and until people of China are not free, until and unless there's no democracy, there's no clear parity, until and unless there is no accountability in China, there's no transparency in China, even the Western countries who would want to have the kind of trade and other relationship, it's not going to go on like this. And therefore, it is important for even the Western countries to speak up now, because people of China have spoken up. The entire world must listen to the call of the people of China who are demanding the subverting the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping to go. So therefore, support me as I say Xi Jinping go. Support me when I say CCP go. We are all going to say go, go. Xi Jinping, go, go. Xi Jinping, go, go. CCP, go, go. CCP, go, go. Xi Jinping, go, go. इसी के साथ मैं अपना बात यहाँ रखता हूँ और भविष्य अभी हमारे साथ कविता जी भी है यहाँ, कविता कृष्ण जी. She is one of the strongest voices for freedom and democracy, and recently she quit the the Communist Party of China, ML. China. The communist the Communist Party of Marxist Leninists. She quit, and therefore she's now going to speak. This is first time that we have a leftist leader, an intellectual, an activist with us, because all this time the leftists in India have always been saying that they are with China. So it is important and it's historic that we have such a supporter today, and mainly for freedom and democracy in China.
Give this to someone such that video is my phone. Just press yeah. Thank you so much to the Tibetan Youth Congress for organizing this protest in solidarity with the protesters in China. I just want to make a few brief points about why I think it's important to be here and why I think that the people of India should stand in solidarity with the people of China who are protesting. And also, I want to address some of the misinformation and propaganda that is being spread against the protests to discredit the protesters and to discredit those of us who are standing here in solidarity. So I just want to go briefly on that. The first thing is that, the protests right now, usually protests in China are very local. They are on some local issue about, say, a local problem of governance. This kind of protest all over China on a single issue, that is rare. Why are they protesting zero COVID policies? First item of propaganda is that, oh, these are like the protesters in the West who deny COVID, who deny that COVID exists, who are against vaccines, and who are protesting that there should be no mask rules and so on. No, that's not it. These are the same people who cooperated with the policies right at the start to control COVID, and they believed what their government told them. They believe that, well, the government has controlled COVID better than any country in the world, and we will achieve that, and after that we will be free of restrictions. Instead, the entire rollout of the vaccinations in China basically did not vaccinate the elderly. They left the elderly at the mercy of COVID. They did not, their own China made vaccine was not effective, and they did not ensure that they had enough vaccines to protect the entire population. And also, of course, in the name of zero COVID, the kind of surveillance which is there to basically not surveil the individual but the disease, right? But all over the world, there are oppressive governments which are using COVID as a pretext to surveil people, and China is among them. So, what is China doing? It is basically you have to carry around an app which will show green if you are safe to move around, you don't have COVID and you are vaccinated, and so on. Red if you can't move around, you have COVID, you're not allowed or you're not vaccinated. And there's some other color like yellow if you're kind of in between. Obviously, everyone wants green, right? Now, you've had people trying to protest on some local issue because suddenly they found themselves locked out of their accounts. So they try to reach the headquarters to say that we've been locked out of our bank accounts. And before they can enter the city where they're going to protest, they find that suddenly all their apps have shown red, which means you're not allowed inside. So this app is being misused. COVID rules are being misused to prevent protest. Obviously, people will protest that. Not only that, providing food to people who are locked up, that has been poor. Workers have been forced to work, locked into factories, forced to work with COVID, without medical care, without proper food. And then when they have escaped, and 90% of the workers at the Zenzu factory, Foxconn factory, which produces iPhones, they were women. They had to walk home, long distances home. That sounds familiar. I'm from India. And I would say that, yeah, that sounds rather familiar. And when it happened in India, we spoke out against our government. We asked questions of our government. Why not? So surely the people of China have the right to do the same. Not only that, just like in India, this very tight lockdowns have resulted in massive unemployment, and small businesses have basically, gone out of business. And so 20% of China's youth are unemployed today. Young Chinese people are not getting jobs. Naturally, they will protest about that as well. Now, I want to come to the next point, which is that people say, okay, basically these protests are funded from the West, and they are an attempt to get regime change. They are color revolutions. Now let's discuss ये क्या मतलब है इसका. Regime change मतलब तख्ता पलट, which means the government, this regime should go. So I want to say, from my experience of 30 years as an activist, that one of the favorite slogans we have always had, and it doesn't matter what government there was in India, if a government did something wrong, did not listen to people's voices, did not, did not respect democracy, then we would say that लोगों का कहना मानना होगा, लोकतंत्र की बात, लोकतंत्र को लागू करना होगा, वरना उसको जाना होगा. What does that mean? It means the regime should obey democracy or else the regime should go. The regime should change. So, what is this thing about discrediting? If a government, if a regime is so repressive that it puts entire populations like the Uyghur population in concentration camps, if it oppresses the Tibetan people, the people of Tibet, if it oppresses their right to express themselves, to be their own free people, if the people of East Turkestan and Tibet are not even allowed to demand their rightful identity and autonomy, in that case, of course, that government does not have a moral right to remain. Which is why I say that when I protest here, I will be asked by my leftist comrades, my good friends, you are protesting here against the left. There are slogans being raised against the CCP, which means you are protesting against the left. I'd like to say to them in reply, I am protesting against an oppressive government. When I protest against the Islamic Republic of Iran, I am not protesting against Islam. Likewise, when I protest against the Chinese Communist Party regime of China, I'm not protesting against communism or against the left. Rather, I'm here to say that I refuse to recognize any regime as any government as socialist, any order as socialist or communist if it is not democratic. To me, any socialism must be more democratic than any capitalist regime. If you're not democratic, you're not socialist. If you're not democratic, in my book, you are not communist. I did not join the left movement in order to defend authoritarian regimes and to offer apologies and excuses for authoritarianism. One last thing. Uh, Here we are in India, and I want to just say a little bit about our experiences in terms of, what my friends here were saying कि भारत के लोगों को क्या सीखना होगा, India, what should we do? I'll say something. I can say it. My Tibetan friends cannot because they are obviously not Indian. I'm Indian. I can say it. I belong here. I was born here. I vote here. I have spoken the truth to every government of every shade. Doesn't matter if it is Congress or BJP or left or whatever. And I want to say here that we should be watchful. The same policies, ask yourself, why did the Modi government not vote in favor? Why did it abstain in the UN when there was a resolution asking for a debate about human rights in East Turkestan, which is called Xinjiang, over there, for the Uyghur people? They abstained. Why? Ask yourself that. Why Indian government always says, China is our threat, China we must speak against. You're speaking about Galwan, but this government hasn't admitted that there was any incursion at Galwan. So what's going on? I think that what's going on and what we need to be aware of is that the same surveillance tactics, facial recognition technology and protesters that is used in China, that China has provided to Myanmar, are being used here as well. My friends here mentioned, that China is behind Pakistan and this and that. I think there's more dangerous things in our neighborhood to worry about, and namely, that China is actually behind the Myanmar regime. It is funding the Myanmar military, due to which the Rohingya people have been displaced, have been forced to flee, they have been turned into refugees and stateless people. What does that mean for us here in India, where the rights of minorities here are in danger? where the rights of ethnic as well as religious minorities are not safe. We should think about these things and look at China not as a socialist regime and what is wrong with it in terms of socialism, but rather in terms of an authoritarian regime that is doing harm due to its authoritarianism. We have to name that harm. We have to speak out against that harm. And so, my last word here is that this blank sheet of paper, people are raising the sheet all over China. And of course, not everyone there is saying, some of them are just protesting zero COVID. But there are people who are also saying that Xi Jinping must go. There are people who are saying the CCP must go, and they're explaining why. One of the slogans they are raising is, we want universal values of democracy and human rights. What does that mean? What does that mean? That means they're saying this because Xi Jinping, in Xi Jinping thought, has repeatedly written, repeatedly spoken to say that we must reject universal values of democracy and human rights. Every country in the world, every civilizational power in the world should be allowed to define democracy in their own way. As long as our people of our country support us, we are democratic, that's democracy. The West has violated human rights so often. Who are they to talk about universal values and so on? Now the point is, yes, sure, the West has double standards. It has not uniformly applied the standards of human rights and democracy, sure. But does that mean that there should be no standards? Because that's what Putin is saying. That's what Xi Jinping is saying. For that matter, that's what Amit Shah is saying. I don't think that that's the way we can be happy, whether we are Indian, whether we are in China, whether you are from Tibet, whether you're from Ukraine or Russia. No, or the USA. We are saying apply those standards uniformly, and we, the people, are going to fight for that, irrespective of which country, which nationality we belong to, because we all have the same rights. We are born with those rights. No government gives us human rights. No constitution gives us human rights. Every human being is born with human rights, born with the right to be free, born with the right to democracy and to free speech. And that is why no government has the right to say, when Xi Jinping says, oh, the people of China are with me, maybe the majority is with you. I've seen some people sneering on social media कि अरे कितने कम लोग प्रोटेस्ट कर रहे हैं, 90% चाइना के लोग तो शी जिनपिंग के साथ है. I want to say, मान लेते हैं, let's assume that the majority is with the government. Does that mean the majority is right? If the majority in India tomorrow suddenly says that Muslims don't belong to India, will that make it right? If the majority in Myanmar says the Rohingyas don't belong to Myanmar, is the majority right over there? If the majority says in India that Muslims should not marry Hindus, would that become right? I'm not saying they're saying that. But if the majority in India says we want caste untouchability, will that make it right? You see, majority is not always right. And so if the majority is racist, if the majority oppresses people of Tibet or people of East Turkestan based on race, based on religion, if it is communal, if it is racist, if it is oppressive, if it's putting people in concentration camps, it is wrong no matter how many people are with it. It is not democratic. Democracy is not majoritarianism. Democracy will be judged by whether an individual, even a lone person, Rabindranath Tagore, who wrote India's national anthem, wrote another song which says, Jodi keu dak na shune tomar, akla cholo re. You must walk alone even if no one hears your call and no one walks with you. And that is what a democracy is, that one person can speak the truth to power even if no one else recognizes it. And that person will not be called anti-national, will not be called a foreign agent, will not be called a CIA agent and put in prison. We want that freedom for everyone. We stood up against America and the America's invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan or any of the crimes America has committed. Likewise, we must stand up against the crime that any other regime commits, including China. And so I'll just end by saying, I will end by raising some slogans in Hindi, because Hindi and, I'm presuming Tibetan and all our languages are easier to raise slogans in. They're better for slogans than English. इसीलिए Xi Jinping मुर्दाबाद, 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 चीन की दमनकारी सरकार मुर्दाबाद, 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 दमन करना रोके नहीं तो दमन बंद करो, बंद करो, बंद करो, लोगों पर दमन करना बंद करो, बंद करो, बंद करो, लोगों पर दमन करना बंद करो, बंद करो, बंद करो, उइगर लोगों को कंसंट्रेशन कैंप में डालना बंद करो, बंद करो, बंद करो, तिब्बत की आजादी लेके रहेंगे, इस पाकिस्तान की आजादी लेके रहेंगे, इस पाकिस्तान के लोग संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। I'll say संघर्ष करो, you will say हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। तिब्बत के लोग संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। इस पाकिस्तान के लोग संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। चीन के छात्र संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। चीन के मजदूर संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। चीन की आम जनता संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। चीन की महिलाएं संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ हैं। चीन में लोकतंत्र लेके रहेंगे, शी जिनपिंग मुर्दाबाद, 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 लोकतंत्र के विरोधी चीन की सरकार मुर्दाबाद, 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 चीन की सरकार मुर्दाबाद, 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 चीन की सरकार दमन रोको, दमन रोको। तो इन्हीं बातों के साथ मैं अपनी बात समाप्त करती हूँ, और बस यही आखिरी में कहूंगी कि यहाँ पर हम लोग आए हैं, लेकिन जहां भी देश में लोग हैं, अगर आप किसी भी इनजस्टिस के खिलाफ आते हैं प्रोटेस्ट में, आमतौर पे आपके देश में, किसी दूसरे देश में आप लोगों के लिए आते हैं, वियतनाम के लिए आए, इराक के लिए आए, अफगानिस्तान के लिए आए, आप जो है ईरान के लिए हो सकता है आए हो या बोलते हो, तो अपने आप से पूछिए कि चीन के लोगों के पक्ष में आप क्यों नहीं आए। अपने दिल में झांक के, अगर आपको जवाब नहीं मिले, इफ यू डोंट गेट एन ऑनेस्ट रिप्लाई फ्रॉम योरसेल्फ, व्हाई यू टर्न आउट फॉर प्रोटेस्ट। टुडे समबडी आस्क्ड मी ऑन फेसबुक कि आप क्यों यहाँ पर इस सवाल पे बोल रहे हैं, चीन के अलावा भी गम है दुनिया में। तो मैंने कहा कि मैं लेफ्ट की हूं, मुझे कम्युनिस्ट मैनिफेस्टो ने कहा कि दुनिया के मजदूरों एक हो, दुनिया के लोग एक हो। उन्होंने नहीं कहा कि दूसरे के गम को अपना मत समझो। वियतनाम के गम को अपना गम समझा आपने, अगर इराक के गम को, अफगानिस्तान के गम को अपना गम समझा, ईरान की महिलाओं के गम को अपना गम समझा, तो पूछिए कि चीन के लोगों के, तिब्बत के लोगों को, ईस्ट तुर्किस्तान के उइगर लोगों के गम को आप अपना क्यों नहीं समझ रहे हैं। सच्चाई से मुंह मत मोड़िए, यही बात मुझे कहना है। शुक्रिया।